Hello, I'm Susan Siegel, Councilwoman of the Town of Yorktown, and welcome to this program, Straight Talk with Susan. My goal in having this program is to talk about Yorktown town affairs with a special emphasis on what's happening at the town board level so people know how we're spending your tax dollars, what projects we're planning, what's on hold, whatever is happening. The program is very loosely modeled after the TV news program Meet the Press. And each week I have a newspaper reporter who covers the town to be my guest and ask questions. And tonight my guest is Rick Pezzullo, editor of the Northern Westchester Examiner. Before we start, let me also say that this is totally unscripted. I typically have no idea what Rick is going to ask me. So there are no papers, no script in front of us. But if you'd like to know more about what's happening in town, I encourage you to take a look at one of the websites I host. It's called CIYinfo.org. Stands for Citizens for an Informed Yorktown. On that site, I post summaries of town board and planning board meetings. And you can follow it by meeting date. You can follow it by subject, so you can find out what's happening with the Costco plan, what's happening with the highway garage, on a finance issue. It could be a wetlands issue that just affects your neighborhood, and you can track it over time. And some of these issues, like Costco, can go over 5 years. Okay, so again, that's CIYinfo.org. And also, if you want to get in touch with me, I think the contact information will be across the screen during the program. But my email is susan@yorktownny.org. And my phone number is Town Hall, which is 962-5722, extension 421. Rick, welcome, and thanks again for being here. Okay, what's on your mind today?
Time flies. It seems I was just here. Here we are almost mid-August already. And
the summer's...
Before we know the election will be here. And I want to ask you just something before we get into some of the specifics about they call this the funny season, and a couple of days ago there was a press conference in Peekskill involving the county legislator, John Testa, who was talking about some irregularities with the petition process. Now, you were not named. You were one of the few people not brought into it. There was a few Yorktown people that were, he was alleging that they submitted phony signatures from people. But I wanted to know if perhaps you could maybe educate the public just a little bit about the process, because I think people will feel that, once the Democrats or Republicans nominate somebody, you're on the ballot, but there's a whole lot more that gets involved. So how difficult is it really to go out and get the however many hundreds of signatures you actually need to become a candidate?
That's a good question, because it is confusing, and typically we do get this question when we're out there. Even though a local party, the Yorktown Democrats, the Yorktown Republicans, same thing with Peekskill, have their own procedures, and they select who they want to be their candidates. State law requires those candidates to circulate petitions, nominating petitions. So only registered Democrats can sign a Democratic petition that would say, in our case, Vishnu Patel, Susan Siegel, Annie Gilbert, etc. And you have to go out. This year, and there's a time frame, and you have to have a certain number of signatures based on the previous gubernatorial election. It's 5% of whatever a number was. I think this time, we needed 584, I think is the number that comes to mind. And I started going out, I think the second day after this window opened, and that's when I broke my leg.
Right.
So I was out of commission for the entire season. I think I had a half of one petition page, filled up. The problem with and then what happens is you typically try to get more signatures. If you need 500, you try to get more, because if somebody signed it incorrectly, for example, if I'm registered under my maiden name, Susan Feller, okay, and I happen to sign Susan Siegel because that's the way I sign my checks and everything else, that signature could be considered invalid. If I printed it instead of signed it, if there's some irregularity with the street, there are lots of technicalities very carefully developed by politicians in Albany. The signature could be disqualified. There are times you could totally disqualify an entire page, and a page is typically 20 signatures.
Yeah, which is what seems like it happened in this particular instant. And, like legislator Testa and some others were, alleging, this was done on purpose and fraud and all this stuff. But it seems like to me that it's very easy to make a mistake on these things. Absolutely.
The one time that I went out, and then I realized when I had already finished going to a street, and again, I knew I had a list, so I only went to registered Democrats, obviously. And then when I looked at the person who signed, like, on line 12, and I looked up and, line 3, he printed. I didn't realize it, So it probably would have been an invalid signature. In the case, and I read this just the other day in another paper, the issue with Testa's signature with the Democratic things is, for the county legislature, many people don't realize what district they're in. And there's some line, I can't even be precise, where the distinction between District 1, John Testa, District 4, Mike Kaplowitz. So apparently Vishnu Patel stopped people. He didn't have a map in front of him, to know exactly. So they checked some signatures, and some were actually not in the district. They were all registered Democrats, but not in District 1. They must have been in District 4.
So when you go out, you get a printout of people that are registered Democrats, right? Based on whatever.
Based on Board of Elections.
The most recent things. And then you guys go out, you knock on the door, hey, would you sign a petition for me? And so you're really taking on faith, right, from these people that if it's John Smith and it says Ken Smith, you're hoping that he's not signing for somebody else, right? Like, you're really taking by faith whoever this person is. You're trusting them that they're saying they are who they are, right?
When I open the door and I say, I'm looking for John Smith.
You don't ask for an ID or, driver's license or something to say.
If you're a notary. Now, you see, to witness the petition, you have to be registered in that party. So I could only go to Democrats because I'm a registered Democrat. If you're a notary, then you don't have to be registered for that party. But then you're supposed to ask for identification and sign a notary book. There's a much higher level of scrutiny if you're a notary. Because I once took a notary course. I never went to take the test. So that's different. That's when you need the ID. But basically, if you say you're John Smith, you're John Smith. And you can't say, if the wife opens the door and says, my husband is up there, he's indisposed, can I sign for him? No, that's not.
But I imagine maybe that happens, right? How would anybody know, right?
Only if the other party challenges it, which is why you try to get more signatures, because you never know inadvertently. You're not doing this on purpose, okay? It just happens, as they say, because I've noticed that some people printed instead of wrote, okay? If they were down on the list, if Mary Smith is down on the list from the Board of Elections saying she's registered as a Democrat, but she moved last week and it's still in the records, and she happens to be at the residence visiting her parents, you don't know. So there are these little technicalities. A few years ago, I can't remember which election, Ed Sifone was circulating petitions to run for councilman as a Republican. And the Republican Party challenged his petitions and knocked him off because he had some invalid ones. So it's always done.
It seems like almost an archaic
Yes.
system, isn't it? Because it must take a lot of time to. I mean, if you say you need 584, you probably submit what 700, 800, just to be sure. So, I mean, how many can you actually get when you're going out in a day? Nobody's home half the time, and this must take forever to get enough signatures.
It is a problem. Yeah. And again, it's the party that makes the selection. So I don't know why it shouldn't just be the Yorktown Democratic Party said this is what we do. When it's a county race or a state race, then it's the district, a district-wide that have to nominate the person. But it's what Albany does, and it's the bottom line is it's all political.
Yeah, but I imagine also, even though you're running, Susan Siegel, you must have a team of people, volunteers that help you, right, to go out to get the signatures?
It's volunteers, it's district leaders.
And you have to rely on them that they're doing everything properly, right? Yeah. So it's like, obviously there's going to be some mistakes along the way.
Which is why you get more.
It's amazing you get anybody on the ballot, the way the system seems to be.
It's designed to, and it makes it harder if you want to run as an independent. So you scrutinize the thing. I think when I can't remember what year I was running, they tried to discount the entire petition. Once it said that I think it was last year when I was running, that was the only local race when I was filling the vacancy. The petition said, I don't remember if it said town council or town board. I can't remember which was on the Democratic petition. And the Republicans challenged that and said, no, it's town board, it's not town council. I mean, we use the terms interchangeably. Right. And so when it's a question like that and a challenge like that, then the two commissioners make a decision. And of course, there's one Republican commissioner and one Democratic commissioner.
Does everybody typically challenge each other's petitions? Or like, do you normally, if you have somebody on the other side, do you normally challenge them, or do you just kind of let it go? And
if they have so many signatures, we typically wouldn't. The Republicans are entitled to who they chose, and the same thing with the Democrats. It becomes more difficult if let's say two people are circulating petitions in the Republican Party, like happened with Ed Sifone. So it was his own party that challenged him. He was not selected by his party, so it's his right as a Republican to circulate petitions, and they challenged and knocked off, and he didn't have enough, so he was minus, which is what happened with, I don't know the name of the person who was running, wanted to challenge Testa.
It was Mr. Hartley or something like that.
Yeah, it's not now. I'm
somebody that hasn't been involved in the process before.
Yeah, and I'm in District 4, so I wasn't paying close attention to that. And so if they knocked out 100 as invalid, he just didn't have enough. Which is why, you do it.
And now is that really fair to the voter now that, there's no opponent now for legislator Testa, so he's running unopposed, so who really is the winner and loser in the,
the people don't have a choice. I think he came late to the game. So it was normally when, once the local the local parties circulate petitions, in addition to their local candidates, they will circulate the petition for county legislator this year. There are also some judicial candidates. And so we walk around with a clipboard, and all of the Yorktown candidates will be on one petition. Then, no, you're not finished yet, you sign that, flip it over. This is also for your county legislator, flip it open. This is for your judge, and there are several. And we did that last year when it was State Senate and State Assembly. So there are multiple. But
it just seems very time consuming, because I'm sure you don't just knock on the door and say, hello, will you sign my petition? You have to explain who you are, and they might say, well, what do you stand for? And you have to sit there for 10 or 15 minutes, probably talking. So if you might only get 4 signatures in an hour or something. All of a sudden you're like, how would you possibly?
I say to them,
it's really amazing when you think about it.
When I was circulating the petitions, I would say, signing this petition doesn't mean you're going to vote for these people. All it does is get them on the ballot, and it's a state law, and we have no other choice. And come November, you can vote for anybody you want. Because just because you're going to a Democratic household doesn't necessarily mean that person's going to vote that way.
But it's just human nature. Somebody want to call up a conversation with you, maybe ask you about an issue, and before you know it, you're there 30 minutes, right? I'm sure that's happened to you.
It could be, yeah. And I felt bad this year that I couldn't do my share of getting this, and because of my leg, and I had to put a burden, on others to go out.
Yeah, I think Vishnu Patel told me he drove like 2,000 miles or something, circulating, not just for you, but for everybody.
And Vishnu, because he is a notary, he gets the petitions. We were also nominated by the Independence Party.
Right.
Not every Democrat, but a good number of the Democrats also are cross-endorsed by the Independence Party. So because he's a notary, he could do that. I could not, do that. So it's what it is, and it's unfortunate, as you say, the voters do not have a choice. Testa is the only one that have nothing against John Testa, but it's nice when voters have a choice.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, let's change gears a little bit and talk about a few issues that have been discussed recently. You had the auditors in not too long ago, and what is kind of your view of the town's finances based on the audit? Because I tried to read it, and frankly, it's very difficult to make heads or tails of what's in this booklet and all these, hundreds of pages. You can't really pinpoint, I guess, unless you're experienced, to see exactly what is the state of the town's finances according to the auditors. Yeah,
there are a lot of numbers, and sometimes you look at on one page it says revenues totaled X, and on another page for the same fund it's Y. So there's a lot of confusion. The other confusion is that the categories used in the audit don't follow the same categories in the budget book. So it's hard to compare apples to apples.
Right.
It makes it difficult. There are two pages that I think were of most interest. One is that our revenues, we came in for the general fund. Our revenue shortfall was about $216,000. Okay?
When you say revenues, maybe explain to people, where does the town get revenue from?
Okay. You get it from sales tax, mortgage tax, building permit fees, planning board fees, recreation fees, a whole slew of administrative fees. We have an alarm fee, people who have house alarms who are hooked up to the police department. That's a fee. Okay. So when you do your budget, you look at all your fees, all your non-tax revenue. Okay? Franchise fees are another big one. The cell towers, that we have. Cable, that's antenna fees, and there's Cablevision and FiOS pay us a fee. So you look at your non-tax revenue. Okay, that's one pot, and you say, all right, I want to spend $25 million, but my non-tax revenue is only going to be $15 million. I need $10 more million. Where are we going to get it from? So you take the balance, you say, I'll take some from fund balance. Okay, that's your rainy day fund. Right. And then the rest is what I'm going to tax the people. So the revenues came in higher in some instances. It came in higher in sales tax. I think mortgage tax might have been down a tad. Building permit fees were down. Court fines, that's another biggie for revenue. That came down, I think, $100,000 less. But
is that because the judges are giving a break to more people?
Well,
less tickets are.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Revenue had been up for a few years because they were dealing with the backlog.
Right.
Okay. But the backlog, I believe, has been taken care of. So now we're just kind of doing current. And a lot of the fines, especially if it's a state ticket, the state takes a good chunk of that money. We don't get it all. Yeah. So that revenue is down. Here's an example. JV Mall got approval for its site plan review, submitted papers for a building permit, all of their drawings and stuff, never picked up the building permit, never paid for it. It's about $100,000. So if you, or previous boards thought, oh, we're going to have all of this building. Planning board fees are going to go way up. Well, guess what? Instead of maybe $100,000 that you projected, you end up with $15,000. Right. The other interesting thing is, as revenue came down, the town spent less. And that's the question that Vishnu and I have. How did you end up spending $1.4 million less? Either your budget was way, way off, or we know that there was padding in the budget. I mean, no question. The previous board put in salaries for positions that they knew that we knew Michael was never going to fill. Okay, like the secretary in his office, okay? A junior attorney that was pure padding. $65,000 for a projector in the YCC theater.
Well, let me ask you, like, you know, the budget gets passed, you know, the beginning of the year, was the end of the December for the following year, and there's, you know, you guys vote on certain things, and certain things are set. Is there any time during the year, let's say midway, that the board reviews the budget and says, where are we at? And, you know, this way you would know if for some reason you budgeted $500,000 and you're only spending $100,000, or you don't really know until, when would you know?
Good question.
Like if it's all of a sudden there's 1.4 million unspent,
Yeah.
that was budgeted. Where is it?
Yeah, well, the question is, I remember back in, it was 2008 or 2009 when the recession was starting to hit. I remember as just a resident asking at a board meeting, what are you planning to take any actions, because it looks like revenue is going to be down by the end of the year. Are you telling department heads to spend less? And I think a memo did go out, hold back on your less critical things. In this case, I wasn't on the board in 2014, but I've been on the board for 7 months now, for 15. I don't get any reports automatically from the supervisor or the finance director. I have to request something. Okay, I have to say, let me see your current expense reports, and I look at them. Okay, but there should be a review. For example, it's already been well publicized that sales tax for Westchester County for the first 6 months of 2015 is down 2.6%. So will we make our projection? The 2015 budget increased the sales projected revenue, right? Because we had done well before.
Right.
Well, if it comes in less. So I don't know. I don't know why the town spent $1.4 million less. I think it's a little disingenuous to say, oh, we're doing more with less. Right. We have great staff and department heads. I'm not criticizing our staff, but that's a big drop. Right. You've been in the boardroom, you know, the leaking ceiling. Yeah, it's roughly about $40,000 to repair it. That's we've been told. We didn't spend money to fix that. We had a bond for it. Okay, the court steps are a disaster. It really gives a bad image of the town of Yorktown when you go and you see all the patches on the concrete. I did ask the comptroller for a report for 2014 with the expenses, because I do look at these things.
Right.
And if you budgeted $3,000 for training, but we didn't do all the training that we anticipated, was it a conscious decision to say, no, you can't spend this money? I don't know.
But the audit that they were talking about was for last year, though, right? 2014.
For 14, yeah.
So you don't really know, here we are in August, how for 2015, what's happening, right? We really have no clue at this point.
But you make me a good point. There should be, sit down with the comptroller and look and see, this is how revenue is coming in. Okay? Typically, we get sales tax in 4 quarters. Offhand, I don't know. Do we tend to get more in the last 2 quarters? You know, so don't get too nervous now, because it could go up.
Right.
But remember, sales tax is related to gas prices, and if gas prices have come down, that means lower sales tax. Some time ago, mortgage tax, I was reading that a lot of the mortgages, the new house sales, were being paid for in cash. That means it doesn't show up in a mortgage tax, even though the sales are good. So there are all of these issues. So it's very complex, but it's disingenuous to say, oh, we're in great shape. Okay.
Right.
We used in the water department, $1.2 million of our rainy day funds to cover expenses. That's, you know.
I would have to think, though, like, you would know this answer since you were a supervisor. Like, when you put together the budget, like, Michael's going to have to put together the budget starting in probably September. He's going to start looking at it. When it, like, what do you look at? What numbers are you looking at when you're putting together the budget for the following year? Are you looking at the audit from 2014? Or are you looking at, like, at some point he must get an update from the controller, how the, you know, where is the town at? Maybe he's not sharing it with the board, I don't know, but he must have some idea where the town is going, right?
You look at, and I did 2 budgets, okay? You look at historically what has it cost. Something like fuel oil is hard to determine because you don't know what the weather's going to be, you don't know fuel oil costs, so you make your best guess estimate. A department head will come and say, this piece of equipment is at its last leg, I need to replace it. So I need $10,000, whatever, to replace it. Certain things are pretty standard. You have a lot of, we have lots of software in the town, and they each have yearly licenses, so you know what that's going to be. So certain things you can predict. You get an estimate from the on what pension costs will be, and you should be getting an estimate of what your health benefits will be. Those are biggie items. You know what your salaries are going to be. We have unfortunately done our insurance purchases too late in the year, which has been bothering me for many, many years. So that's hard to plug those in. So it's a combination. That's on the expense side. Department heads make a budget. They give it to the controller. She kind of enters it all. Then I sit down with the department head, and they try to justify, I really need that piece of equipment. Please don't take it out of my budget. Okay, I'll make the decision because this is the supervisor's budget. I'll, let's say, leave it in. Okay. Gets then to, in November, we meet with the town board, and that's when the department head could say, the supervisor took it out of my budget. Would you please, I need an extra thing, or I forgot to put something else in. You know, add that in. On the revenue side, which is really critical, basically you should estimate your expenses high and your revenue low. You don't want to overestimate your revenues. That's like saying my Aunt Minnie's going to die and leave me, you know, $50,000, and you go to Florida for a vacation on that. You look at averages. You look at 5-year averages, basically.
Well, is there anything that came up in this audit that you're going to put in the back of your head, wait, I got to look out for that when the budget comes in, the tentative budget? Was there something that was kind of alarming?
Not for the audit, because the audit groups everything together. I looked at the budget line. I got the report from the controller that I asked for.
But I mean, the auditor this time, he didn't give you anything specific that you looked at and said, I got to remember to look at that when the budget comes out.
His categories combine everything. It's like buildings, combine everything. So it's town hall of the YCC, the police department. If I want to see, was it fuel, was it maintenance, was it periodicals, was it litigation? I want to see what the specifics are, because that's what we need when we make the budget. The audit lumps it all together. We've got a 1 minute, and I have a feeling we're going to talk about a lot of budget come into October and November.
Absolutely.
Any other quickie items?
Is there any quick update you can tell people about the Baptist Church Road situation?
Yeah, 2 of the culverts need to be replaced. They cannot be relined. So they're going to work on a hybrid solution for that. We're still waiting for what they call engineering profiles on the one that's collapsed. And then we have to negotiate with...
Still negotiating with the property
owner
over
with the
there?
property owner, because the more the culvert goes into his property, the lower the wall. The lower the wall, the less expensive for the taxpayers. So we have to come to an agreement with him. The town is working as quickly as it can to do it, and will expedite it. There was a little unfortunate kicker. Michael said the other night that when the town declares an emergency, we don't have to go to competitive bidding, which slows the process down. But the town has gotten $298,000 from FEMA, okay? And he has to look and see whether FEMA regulations require competitive bidding. So if that's it, we don't know. So we are working, and we're trying to do it as
Yeah.
quickly as we can. This is an emergency. Sadly, I think it's unfortunate that it wasn't done last year.
Well, nobody ever said government works quickly, right? That's for sure.
But there's no, to me,
Right.
there's just like there's no excuse that the tennis courts are in disrepair.
Right.
With 3 emergency bridge replacements in 1 year is
Yeah.
a bit much.
Yeah.
So again, thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you.
question. And remember that next year when somebody comes by and asks you to sign a sign a nominating petition, it doesn't commit you.
Right.
It just gets it online because that's the state regulations.
I've never actually had anybody ever come to my door, surprisingly.
Now, I'm not asking you which party, but are you registered for a party?
No, I'm not.
See, that's why.
There you go.
The only way they could ask is